everyone. This is Admin LJ from the Between the Chapters book club. I am so excited to have everyone joining us this evening. I know we've been posting about it like crazy in the group, but this is our very first live Q&A, so I can't wait to spend a little bit of time with you guys and with our super special guests. So this evening, we're going to be joined by two remarkable authors. Unfortunately, we did have a little bit of a scheduling issue. Jill Chavez is not going to be on the chat with us, at least at the very start. Hopefully she'll be able to tune in with us a little bit later into the broadcast. If not, hopefully sometime in the future, we'll get the chance to bring her back on. That said, we are going to be chatting with Marina Adair and RaeAnne Thayne. Both are incredible authors that I can't wait for you guys to talk with this evening. A little bit of housekeeping before I bring them onto the screen. We will be posting this broadcast up onto YouTube and on our Facebook page if you are not able to stay online for the full thing. So don't worry about that. You'll get to watch all of it later on. However, if you are tuning in with us live, you can leave a question down in the comments below, and I will be getting to those throughout the broadcast. So if you have anything you want to chat about with me, the authors, get our opinions on anything, or ask questions about their books, please feel free to pop those down below. Everyone who leaves a question will be entered to win multiple flash giveaways, so definitely get in that comment section. So without further ado, Marina Adair is a #1 nationally best-selling author whose fun, flirty contemporary romances have sold over 1 million copies. And RaeAnne Thayne is a New York Times best-selling author who finds inspiration in the beautiful northern Utah mountains where she lives with her family currently. And without further ado, I'm going to add both of them into our live chat so we can get started.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know I speak for everyone in our book club when I say that we've really been looking forward to this all week long.
So
I'm thrilled to be here. Yes, definitely.
So I know I gave a little bit of an intro to let everyone know who you guys are, but I would love it if you would both introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your newest book.
RaeAnne, why don't you go?
Okay, I'm RaeAnne Thayne. I have been doing this for a long time. My first book came out in 1996, so that tells you that I have been around forever. My next book is called The Path to Sunshine Cove, and it comes out on the 30th of this month, and it is kind of a standalone hardcover, but it's set in my community of Cape Sanctuary, where I've had a few other books set in the same place. Marina helped me plot this book, and it's about two sisters, and one of them, they both have kind of a traumatic childhood. Well, obviously they shared the same childhood because they were sisters, and they've dealt with it very differently. One of them travels around the world in an pulling her Airstream trailer, helping people clean out their houses. And the other one is very much an Instagrammer, influencer, very much about home and family. But they really want to come back together as sisters. And so sort of some circumstances happen and they end up in the same community and lots of drama and fun ensues.
And I remember when we were plotting that book and you talked about your heroine's job was to drive around in her RV and help people unpack and pack their life. I'm like, I want to have that heroine at some point in my book. So yes.
I told her she can use it. Take a few years from now, it's all yours. You can use it.
Thank you. So I'm Marina Adair, and I write contemporary romance that is funny and quirky, but also very tender and deep. The book I'm going to be talking about tonight is Hopeless Romantic. It's the second book in my When in Rome series. And if I were to describe it, it would kind of be 3 men and a baby, because there's 3 men who are all raising one teenage daughter. And it would be a modern twist on that. And it follows 2, I guess you would call them frenemies to lovers, opposites attract, who are both struggling with the responsibilities of each of their families. And so Beckett, my heroine, Her brother and father actually both have autism spectrum disorder. And so she is the sole caretaker for both her father and brother. And in that, it finds it a really hard time to find time for herself, let alone find time for love. And when I first started writing this book, so autism spectrum disorder is something that's very near and dear to my family's heart. We have some experience in it with my own family. But RaeAnne also helped me write this. And I talked to her a lot about what it's like to be a caretaker and the stress that comes with that and the responsibility. But RaeAnne, being wonderful RaeAnne, also pointed out that there's a lot of really wonderful moments that as caretakers we have that no one else will really have or understand unless you're in that position. So in the end, two of the town's biggest hearts have to figure out if they could put themselves first in the hopes of finding love. And that's what the book is about.
I think I speak for, again, everyone in the book club when I say that both of those sound amazing. And I love that both of the stories really center around these additional relationships outside of just the typical romance. You know, it's a lot bigger and it's much more of a community setting for both of you guys. That's really incredible.
Very much so. I think we both try to bring that in all of our books, really, that it's more, the romance obviously is the center point, but there are so many other relationships that are important to explore. You know, you don't live in a vacuum meeting a person and that's all there is to your life. You know, there's all these other elements that push on you. And so it's great to be able to have the opportunity and the space to explore the different relationships.
Right.
Well, and while I love my hero and heroines, a lot of times my favorite characters to write are the secondary characters, whether it be the dad or the quirky grandma. But in the end, they end up being the characters that I want to sit down every morning and write their stories. Like I said, I still love my hero and heroines, but it's those secondary relationships that excite me as a reader and a writer.
Absolutely. I mean, who doesn't love a quirky best friend or quirky sister or, you know, just that quirky neighbor that you never quite know what they're going to say.
Right.
So we do have a couple of really great reader questions coming in. So first up, one of our readers is asking, who is your favorite author?
So for me, I'll have to break it down into genre. Contemporary romance, I got to go with Jill Chavez. I was actually a fangirl before I became her friend. Romantic suspense, Suzanne Brockman, all the way. But my favorite overall writer is actually Aaron Sorkin, who's a screenwriter. He wrote The American President. He wrote The West Wing, The Newsroom. He was the writer so my background is in film studies and my MFA is in screenwriting. Through that process, I found out that I wanted to write novels. So when I sit down to write dialogue, especially when there's multiple people in the room, mainly men, when I have, you know, 3 brothers or 3 best friends in the room, I always think back to Aaron Sorkin and his brilliant banter and the humor that he brings to the situation. So those would have to be my 3 tops.
I have so many, it's very hard for me to, to name because honestly, I find new authors all the time and discovering new people all the time. I'm very much historical is my jam when I'm reading for pleasure. I love contemporaries and I love all my friends who write contemporaries. I love their books as well. But if I were picking up a book just to escape, it tends to be like a historical romance. And so, you know, Eloisa James, Julia Quinn, all the big ones that are so brilliant at setting that scene and giving us that to escape. Those are the ones that I love.
Did you watch Bridgerton, RaeAnne?
I did watch
Me
Bridgerton.
too. It's so good. I watched it twice.
It was delightful. I loved it.
I'm so behind. It's on my list and I keep staring at it and haven't gotten to it yet.
Just start it and then I promise you will just keep going.
Well, started at like 5 o'clock on a Friday because you're going to end up on Saturday morning watching I did that, all the episodes at one time.
That's always the problem. Like, okay, I know once I start it, I'm not going to pause the show. So what do I do? So it's on the list. It's coming. All right. So another great reader question. both your stories are these small town stories. How do you decide where to set them? How did you come up with those places?
RaeAnne, you want to take
Okay,
that first?
yes, sure, I'll take that. So in my case, I like to do a fictional community myself. It's hard for me to write in a real place just because unless I'm living in that real place and can really immerse myself, I don't want to get things wrong. So for me, I like to just create a place. Usually it's an ideal place that I would like to live in, and then I just plan it somewhere that I need the geography for. So I've written a couple of different series. One was in Colorado, and I just created a ski town outside of, about an hour and a half from Denver, which is just about where a lot of the ski towns are, about an hour and a half vaguely from Denver. And I take places that I actually do know. So in that case, Park City is a place I go to quite often here in Utah. And so I sort of incorporated a lot of the things of Park City and put it in this place in Colorado. The same with, I have another series, my series right now called Cape Sanctuary. It's in Northern California, roughly where Eureka, I don't know how they say it there.
Eureka,
I think.
Utah has a Eureka, which is weird, but anyway, it's roughly around in that area, Trinidad, Eureka, around there. But I basically took Cannon Beach, Oregon, and Monterey, California, or PG, California, and mashed them together, the places I love there, and put it in a totally new geography setting. So that's how I do it. And I just have to think, do I want this to be, mountains, ocean, on a lake, a river? What sort of things can I incorporate into a series that would give the series sort of a lot of different geographical elements that I can bring in?
Right.
So for my first series, the St. Helena Vineyard series, I lived in St. Helena for 3 years. And I thought if I was ever going to write a romance, this would be the place to do it. And it was the first and last time I ever used a real location, because you run into things like people who live there, who are visited there, very specific. Oh, well, that road doesn't cross this road. And no, that
Right.
restaurant isn't there. It's this restaurant. And so after getting a lot of those emails, my next books from then on out, I've created small towns, kind of like RaeAnne.
Mm-hmm.
And so Rome, Rhode Island, I created because in book 1 in my When in Rome series, my heroine is Vietnamese, adopted by 2 white parents and raised in a white community. And Connecticut is the second whitest state in the country. So I wanted to move her to the first whitest state in the country, because her whole idea is she wants to get out and explore and meet different people and different cultures, something so far from what she grew up in. And she ends up going to a town that's almost exactly the same. And then through her journey, she figures out that it's not where she lives or the culture she may tap into. She is who she is because she's had a special and unique upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
So Rome was just kind of something I came up with in my head, and a book I just finished and turned into my editor yesterday is it takes place in a fictitious town near Carmel called Pacific Cove. There is a Pacific Grove, which I'm basing it on, but I wanted to give it a little bit of a fictitious name so that I could change up some of the streets and some of the cafes and things like that.
No, I think that's very smart. As someone who's fairly geographically challenged, I would never, even though I lived in the same town for close to 22 years, would never be able to write about it. I would get it wrong all the time. So definitely appreciate that.
I have to say, I'm old enough to be around before the internet, honestly, because my first books, I can remember writing to these chambers of commerce of different towns to send me all the information they had about their town, because I didn't have another way to research all these places, So that tells you how long I've been doing this.
Yeah, Google Maps is my friend. I love Google Maps.
I do Google Maps a lot. I do.
Right. I do love the dedication to that level of research.
I know, right?
Great. So that does kind of make me wonder, since both of your towns are, these amalgams of, they're a little real, a little not, they're kind of places is there a place in both of your fictional settings that you would love to go visit or that you would love to see in real life? And I'll let Marina start first.
So I think St. Helena is just such a pretty town, but I lived there for 2 years, so that's kind of cheating. I would have to say it would be my Sequoia Lake series, because it takes place in a fictitious town in the Sierra Nevadas called Sequoia Lake. So you have the trees and the snow, rolling hills, and then of course there's a big lake in town. I kind of based it on Truckee and Donner Lake. So that is one place that I would love to go visit. Plus the heroes there were super hot in that book, so that would be nice too.
I think mine would be the Cape Sanctuary, just because I love the ocean. I live in the mountains, and so I've written other books that are set in the mountains because that's something I'm very familiar with. But I do love every time I get a chance to go to the ocean. There's just something so peaceful and calming that I find there, which is why I tend to like to set books there.
And I live near the ocean, so anytime I can get out and get to
so
like
come to the
hills,
mountains,
right? That's why you guys were always like, "We'll meet on the beach in LA," and I'm like, "Okay, at least it's warmer than my beach." But the main thing is I get to see you guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we didn't mention that we get together to plot. So maybe we should tell them about our plot.
Yes,
our plot groups.
I was gonna say, you both mentioned kind of at the start that you've helped each other plotting your books, and it's very clear that you're good friends. So can you guys tell readers a little bit about what that friendship is like, what it means, like what you mean when you say that you help each other with your books?
Well, I'll start by saying that Jill and RaeAnne have known each other since the dawn of time. I was the latecomer coming in. So they were going to a plot group in Manhattan Beach. This is where we kind of meet. And Jill called and said, "Hey, we're looking for one other person. Do you want to do it?" I'm like, yes, please, yes. So we get together at a house. RaeAnne is so sweet. She always ends up finding us the best Airbnbs. And they're always overlooking the beach and near downtown with wonderful food. And we each come with a different story, with the characters kind of figured out and the basic turning points in the story. And then each person gets 2 hours on one day and then 2 hours on another day. Am I saying that right? We each get 4 hours total, right?
To do 2 books, unless you have a big book that has multiple plots, you could get 2 books in, or one big book with a lot of subplots if you need help with that.
And so what I found it's helped me with 2 ways. One, a lot of the times when you're writing in a vacuum, you tend to do the super generic, easy thing that everyone else on the planet's doing. But when you go in with 2 other plot partners, and then we have a third one, Sky Jordan. So when there's 4 of us, they'll set you down and say, "Well, you've kind of done that. What if we did this? Or could maybe consider going this route?" So for me, it opens me up to new ideas that I might not have gone after. And then the second thing that I love so much about our plotting retreats is if I get stuck somewhere in my book and I need help, I could call Jill or RaeAnne and say, "Hey, here's where I'm at. I'm stuck." And they know my book as well as I know their books. So they're able to help me troubleshoot and figure out what's going wrong or how I could fix it.
Right. Or if we need headline help, title help. Sorry, I was a newspaper editor for a long time. I think of headlines, but if we need title help, then we can say, "Hey, you guys know what the story is about. Can you guys think of any titles that we could use?" I'm brainstorming with my editor or whatever. And because we've kind of got a team behind us, we've really missed it. We were talking about the last time both of us traveled was last February of 2020 when we met the last time. And all of us have struggled this year with the books that we've had to write that we did not plot together, because there's just, you work out so many of those details that come in handy as you're writing that you don't have to sit there and stress about, because you know them, the turning points, some plot. We always come up with certain like scene ideas that we wouldn't have come up with on our own. And so there's kind of a magic that happens when you have that group think where everybody's bringing their own different perspectives to something. And like Marina watches TV. I don't watch a lot of TV shows. So she's always saying, "Hey, I saw this in a TV show. What if we did something on The Bachelor?" I don't watch.
Hey, The Bachelor is great for backstories, man.
I could see that being the case.
Well, and it's also neat, like what she touched on is that it's not just different ideas. I think all of us bring a different strength to the team.
I think so too.
I can do dialogue. Since screenwriting was my background, I could do pages and pages and pages of witty banter that goes nowhere. Right. And Jill is really good at the humor, but also saying, okay, we need to have this turning point, this turning point, this turning point. And RaeAnne is really good at A, keeping us on track, and B, bringing all of the really emotional, tender moments that those of us were like, for me, my first go-to is funny. Deep emotion is a little bit more harder for me, but that's RaeAnne's like bread and butter. So she's able to point out places in my scene that, you in this moment, you could really tap into the way that she's feeling. And how would she be feeling, RaeAnne? Well, so I think all four of us bring something wildly different to the table. And that's why I think that this is such a magical group. I've had other plot partners before. It's never been like this. This is really the dream team.
I think that's really incredible. I love when someone becomes not just your like work partner and your teammate, but also kind of that life friendship that, it's very similar to what comes across in your books. It's that friendship bond is so important and so strong for people. So I love that really comes across not only in your own lives, but you can see it in your books. I think that's so special.
Thank you.
I think as writers, we have to be so, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but, we have to be all our own little island, but there are times when you just need somebody who gets what you're going through and what, the struggle, because it is hard. Writing is hard. And so you really need those people who understand what you're going through. And I can absolutely say Marina and Joan and Jill have my back all the time.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we do have a question from Kensington CEO and President Stephen Zacharias.
Hi, Stephen.
So he's wondering, what genres do you like to read outside of romance?
RaeAnne, you could take that first.
Sure. I like to read like cozy mysteries. I like to read, I like nonfiction. I like really well-written nonfiction that you just have to stop at the prose and just say, wow, that just amazes me. I like some autobiographies and biographies from people, just to read about people's journeys and what they've been through. I will admit that if we're not talking reading, I'm a big true crime addict, but I don't like to read true crime. I don't like to read it. I like to listen to podcasts.
I agree wholeheartedly.
So yeah, that's kind of my jam.
I think I have watched every true crime show over COVID that's on between Netflix and Hulu. I've watched even like the small, what is it called? Hometown Homicide. That's the one we're watching now, and it's so good. For reading wise, what I think because of my background, I love reading screenplays. Like Spanglish, one of my favorite screenplays I've ever read. So I love getting my hands on screenplays. And nowadays it's easier with the internet. Before, I would actually have to reach out to the Screenwriters Guild to go ask for a time to go in, and then you could go into their room and actually read the screenplays. But now you could find them online. So I could read screenplays all day long.
I do love to read a good screenplay. I've done it a couple of times, and I always find myself so fascinated by the process. I could never write them, though, so that takes a whole other kind of skill. We do have another question. So there's been mentioned once or twice about how, COVID has really changed things over the last year, of course, for all of us. And one of our readers is wondering, how have you balanced all of the world changes that have been happening this last year with your writing and with your family lives? And how have you had to adapt? What have you found? And I guess what I'm also interested in is what you found you were surprised you really liked about it.
So I'll take it first. I don't know if I mentioned here before talk. So my husband and I downsized because we were empty nesters, and then COVID hit. And at the time it was my husband, me, and our little old lady cat that we call Big Mama. Well, then my daughter came home from college with a kitten. So we went from empty nesters to party of 5 in 800 square feet. So we're kind of on top of each other. It's been challenging because my daughter's in school, she's in college. I work from home, my husband works from home. We each have calls. I need the house to be quiet. But in the midst of all of that, we've been on top of each other. We haven't lived like this since my daughter was in elementary school. So there's this really neat silver lining where we play board games all the time. Tonight is movie night. Friday night is Friday family Disney night. So tonight is my husband's choice. Each week we rotate. We've bought board games that we've never heard of before. We've cooked dinners together. So we've had a lot of family time that I never would have had with an adult child. Mm-hmm. So even though the world was kind of crazy, and RaeAnne, I don't know how it was for you, but for me, figuring out my pace and how to write when I felt like the world was just, everything was unknown, everything was a big, scary issue. In the beginning, it was really hard to sit down and write romance while it felt like the rest of the world was falling apart.
Mm-hmm. It has been hard, and I think that is a universal feeling that a lot of writers have had. That some have said they're really creative during this time because they don't have anything else to do, and I want to smack them all because I don't have any time right now, and that's been hard for me. So we have still one in high school, and so we had to do the homeschool thing for the first part of the lockdown. We've been lucky enough that they've been in person school here in Utah since, with social distancing and things like that, and there've been some times he's been home on quarantine this year, but his senior year, he's mostly been actually in person. But the first part we were home, so we had to deal with that. And then as Marina kind of touched on, I have a son with severe disabilities who used to go to a day program. He's been in some kind of education thing since he was 3, and he's 24. And so we couldn't send him anywhere. His health is too frail. So he's just been home with us, and he takes total care all the time. And so my husband has juggled a lot of that so that I can still work, but it's always there knowing that I need to come home and help and do my part. And I'm lucky enough that I have an office next door, so I can at least kind of go away from some of the craziness and still be close enough that I could run home. But it's been really hectic, and it's been hard, but there have been a lot of gifts. I think we all have sort of learned to focus on what the important things. We've sort of cut life down to the essentials and realized that was not important. All those things I used to stress about so much, I did fine without them all this time. There are lots of things like that I've discovered in my life and really sort of pared down to the essentials of what matters. And that's my family, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a big equalizer in figuring out what's really a big deal and what's really just a waste of energy and what's important.
I think it's definitely a seminal shift in our society. There's going to be a lot of things that will never go back to the way they were a year ago. Never, ever. And then some of that will be good. Some of that will be bad. But, I don't think we can totally change as a society back to where we were.
Absolutely. And, I know I'm kind of segueing into, I've seen a couple of readers asking this question. So, there's, especially over this last year, a lot of people have made huge life changes, whether it's, moving back home or moving, somewhere out of cities or having to downsize or even changing jobs, whether by necessity or by requirement or, just because now's the time to chase a dream. So there are quite a few readers wondering, if you weren't currently writing, if you weren't, pursuing that dream of being an author, being published, what's another dream career or dream job that you would love to have done?
So I actually kind of lived my dream job. Prior to becoming a mom, I was a competitive cheerleading coach. And I loved it. I coached girls I did one when I coached college, it was a co-ed team, but I preferred all girl teams, and everywhere from middle school all the way up through college. I loved the influence that sports have on kids. I love how it gives them a direction and purpose. When I first started coaching at the high school I spent the most amount of time at, it was a smaller team and only 2 girls had interest in going to college. 10 years later, by the time I left that program, 90% of my girls, and at this point I would have about a team between JV and varsity, 50 to 75 girls on the team, and 90% of them went off to some sort of higher education, whether it was to become a hairdresser or junior college or a 4-year college. So I'm too old now, but if you're saying dream job, so in my dream, I am morphing myself back into my 30-something body.
Sky's the limit.
Right? I would probably go back and work with teenage girls in some capacity.
It's hard for me to think of something that I would do, because I mean, I've been a published author almost as long as I was not a published author, because,
right.
you know, I mean, I've done this for so many years. It's hard to remember when I didn't have deadlines constantly hanging over me. But, you know, I think if I could do anything, I would be like a digital nomad and just travel around the world. If I didn't have family, if I didn't have all those obligations, travel around the world, you know, writing travel stories, or I loved the human interest stories that I would do as a newspaper reporter. And I'd love to do something like that. Just go talk to people and find out about their lives and bring those stories to the world.
RaeAnne, we could team up. So there is a job, a friend of mine has this, that hotels, cruise lines, they hire her and send her to all these different places for her to then write about it and come back with a rating for if this cruise line should use this excursion for the day, or if this specific hotel should buy out this bigger or this smaller hotel franchise. And that's all she does. They pay her a lot of money to fly all around the world and meet people. And we could do it together.
That would be so fun.
I do have to say, if the pair of you ever traveled the world or went on some kind of adventure like that, I would definitely either need you to film it or put that in a book, because I need to know what you guys get up to when you're off on adventures.
We'll get one of those go cams and we'll
yes.
just wear them right on our forehead everywhere we go.
I
The only
have
problem
a
is
feeling it's a hoot.
Jill doesn't like to travel too much, so we'd have a hard time dragging her with us.
She would go from beach to beach, but that's about it. She only likes the beach.
And she'd have to go home in between
Yes.
because she needs her dog.
Yes.
You know, there's nothing wrong with a good beach tour. I would be down for a good beach excursion.
There you go. That would be fun.
All right, so we have a few readers wondering, you know, you spoke a little bit early at the beginning about what kind of research you used to do for the settings of your books. And I know we've mentioned that Google Maps are now a big thing for you guys, just for in terms of getting a sense of what you're doing. But in addition to that, what kind of research, if any, goes into your books? Has there ever been a really interesting or memorable fact or memorable find that you came across while you were in that research mode?
Well, in my When in Rome book, both book 1 and 2, even though they were things that I wrote about were issues that I wanted to bring to light, that I deal with personally in my own family, I still wanted to make sure that I did the research, because just because my daughter's Vietnamese and we're white and she grew up in a pretty white community, her experience is still going to be different from other people's. So I actually reached out to, she used to go to a heritage camp during the summer, where it would be girls just like her that were either adopted from Vietnam or Thailand and were raised by white parents. And they spent a week being able to hang out, talk to each other about their lives, the problems they're having, cement these great friendships. So I actually reached out to some of those girls to see what their experience had been like. And then I kind of took the parts of those that I thought fit into my character to help shape who she was. And then in book 2, my heroine's brother has Asperger's. And so I also wanted to do some research. So I called a couple of friends whose kids have Asperger's and talked to them about what are the funny things that happen, what are the heartbreaking things. And actually in Hopeless Romantic, there is a scene where Thomas, Beckett's brother, is asking, the hero is saying, "So you're into me?" And she's saying, "No, I'm not." And the brother is saying, "Yes, you are. You know, you put on lipstick, you change your shoes 4 times, you change your outfit 11 times, you're grooming, you want to fornicate." And it was a funny moment because this really happened with a friend's son. She came in and found him Googling fornication. And so then he was giving her dating tips for when she went out to go on dates about how to be a peacock and how to primp yourself.
Right.
So there was a lot of funny stuff that came out of that. And then there was also a lot of really deep emotional stuff that came out of those conversations.
I love to research as a former journalist. I could go deep in the weeds on any topic and dig as very deeply in lots of things. And so I have to kind of check myself sometimes because I'll find myself spending so much time researching that I'm avoiding the writing because I'm having so much fun digging into certain things, but it's always bizarre to me, the weird things that I end up having to look up that I think I should know this. What's the answer to this? And having to dig. And I have certain trusted, people that I turn to, like I have a sister who's a nurse. So if I ever have a medical problem, I call her and say, hey, what would happen in this situation? What would you do? What would how would somebody deal with it? And then I have a brother who's in the military, a brother-in-law who's in the military. And so I can always say, hey, so I've got a character who was in the military. How long would she be in before she got out? How many tours would she do overseas? That sort of thing. So he gives me all the skinny that way. So it's really nice to have a couple of different trusted people. But honestly, I could, especially like if I'm trying to come up with like street names and things like that, I could just spend all day looking at Google Maps, like we talked about, trying to come up with street names.
I definitely think, just for me personally, I know I would probably get lost on the Google Maps side of things and just like play with that street view finder all day long. I would never get any writing done. But
and I like to look at like houses, like Marina's talked about how I'm always the one who finds our Airbnbs, VRBOs that we stay in because I love doing that. And so if I'm trying to figure out where do my people live, I'll go look up houses and I could be forever looking at pictures of houses and plans for houses and different things like that.
I see nothing wrong with that other than the fact you do have to write.
I have to write the
book.
I
guess that is a little bit important in the process.
It's all texture. I bring it all in, it's background.
And, at the end of the day, that's what matters. So we have a couple of readers wondering, do you have any rituals for your pub day and release day? How do you celebrate that moment when the book is finally out and in readers' hands?
RaeAnne, do you want to take that one?
I don't usually do much except for all the PR stuff that I need to do that day. I mean, I really don't anymore. I mean, I'm working on my 68th book. And so I've had a lot of pub days in my time. And so it always is exciting. I love it. I'm always excited. I usually make a post on Facebook or things like that. But if I went out to dinner every time I had a pub day, we'd be going to dinner a lot. But I do celebrate. It's fun. What about you, Marina? What do you do?
So I used to think, like the first or second book, my husband and I went out to our favorite restaurant and we celebrated. And then I started realizing the same thing, that if I celebrated with every release, I was going to be going to our favorite expensive restaurant, every quarter. So, and I also think a misnomer, at least from what I thought that release days were these amazing, fun things that writers got to do. They're, at least for me, it's exciting that the book's out, but they're pretty stressful. Right. You have blog posts that you're doing, you have interviews that you're doing, you have to get the word out, you're reaching out to your reader team. There are so many things that I actually find my work day is double the length when I have a release day versus if it's just a normal work day.
I should add, I usually don't have that as a writing day. I know that release day is going to be busy doing other things, and I'm not going to be able to get any writing done that day because I'm going to be busy doing all the other things and checking my rankings and things like that we don't like to talk about that we do.
all the things we're not supposed to do.
But the one constant that I do every time is I order Indian food. No one else in my house likes Indian. So I order Indian food, my favorite cuisine. I get the same dish and I have it delivered to my house. And then I, of course, eat it over like the next 3 days because it's always so much food. But I guess that's the constant thing that I do with every release.
And one more thing I forgot to say, my husband does bring me flowers. He goes to usually Sam's Club and brings flowers on release day.
That's so sweet.
Yes.
I love that.
It is.
I think flowers should be everyone deserves a nice spread of flowers, just for any occasion, but especially on a like special day like release day, even if it is a stressful day. Let's see. So another reader would love to know, especially because I think it's very evident in our conversation that it's pretty easy for, I think, everyone these days to get a little distracted while you're working. Do you ever have trouble or ever run into the problem of getting distracted while you're writing? How do you
Every
kind of
day.
block that out?
Every day. So lately, when my daughter came home, I thought I'm never going to so I'm dyslexic, and my kind of dyslexic causes me to have a really hard time focusing. So I'm kind of all over the map. So my husband got me these noise canceling earphones, and they actually have a super light hum in the background that calms your subconscious. So it actually gives me peace. I could focus on what I need to be focusing on, and everything else in the world around me is completely shut off. But it's funny because someone will call my name, like my daughter, and she'll come in. She's like, I've been calling you for 20 minutes. I'm like, you need to come in and do this.
Right.
That's the only way I'm going to hear you. So that has been my fix, is my little earphones. Or they're big, actually. They cover my whole.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I've been lucky, as I said before, that I have an office that I can go to and it's quiet and there's nobody else there. The downside of that is I've gotten into where I need that to be creative. And if I'm surrounded by chaos, it's really hard for me to bring that. So when I can't have that, it's very tough for me. So I need to get me some Marina earplugs sometimes. But I work with a timer. That's my best friend, is I'll make myself write for 45 minutes and then take a 10 or 15 minute break to just play with my dog who comes with me to work, or else to, walk around my office or to walk outside for a minute, breathe fresh air, let the dog out or whatever. And then I'll set the timer again for 45 more minutes. And I just do that during the day just to keep myself, focused. It's still hard and I also have to turn off my email so that I don't get that ping.
Yeah.
I put my phone on do not disturb because, I'll get those pings. My sisters tend to text me throughout the day and I always want to respond. And so I have to turn that off. But there's so many, I'm so much more distracted than I was back in the day when I first started writing. And I don't know if that's me or if there's so many more distractions in our life or what.
I think
there's more.
Yeah. Well, and I also think too that when you write your first few books, there's this excitement that's you haven't failed yet. You haven't had a hit yet. So all of the possibilities are limitless, and it's super easy to get excited about it. And then as the books go on, and you've written a lot of different kinds of stories, at least for me, I found that it's easier to get distracted now, whereas before, nothing could distract me because that was all I wanted to do all day long. Which I think is kind of with any new job, right? It's the honeymoon phase.
I definitely, I think I go through the honeymoon phase like once a week, honestly. It kind of cycles through. But I think this question was kind of answered by your first answers, but I've seen it a couple of times, so I want to pose it anyways. Some folks are wondering if you ever listen to music, and I'm going to expand that question a little bit. If you ever listen to music while writing, or if you can't while writing because you get distracted, maybe while making characters or the plotting phase, like, is there ever a time when music plays a part in what you're doing?
So at night before I fall asleep, I always know what I'm going to write the next day. I look at my little outline, and I'm very much a plotter. And it's very detailed, and I think, okay, this is what I'm going to write tomorrow. And then I find one or two songs that match whatever it is, that feeling that I'm trying to get across. And I usually listen to them on repeat for about an hour before I fall asleep. I can't listen to it while I'm writing, but the night before I write a scene, I need my music to get me in the mood for the next morning.
I'm going to try that. That's a great idea. I'm going to try that. So, and I can tell you that I've traveled through the whole gamut in my writing career, where for many years I had to listen to music. That was how I tuned everything out. I wrote my first probably 25 books in the dining room of our house with people running around all the time, and so I had to do that. And so, and then I really like soft jazz, instrumental jazz with, not music. It distracts me. Or if I listen to jazz that has lyrics, they have to be in a foreign language, so I'm not singing along or whatever. As I've gotten, probably the last about 5 or 6 years, I've started dictating a lot of my first drafts, and so I can't have other music going while I'm dictating those first drafts. And so just the first draft, I have to edit, not dictation. But if I'm just throwing it out on the page, I can dictate. But then as I'm in the editing phase, I find myself once more liking to listen to like focus music or focus instrumentals. I'll go and find meditation music or things like that, just something that'll fill the noise a little bit so my head can calm a little bit, so that I'm not out there like I seem to be lately as the older I get.
I think these days we're all a little out there. It's just a universal experience at this point. I think for all of us, we just have to be honest with ourselves about it.
Yeah, I think you're right, unfortunately.
So I'm wondering, has there ever been a character for any of your books that you've written, and I know there's a lot in the backlist, but is there ever a character that you kind of wish you could live their life for just one day and just be in their shoes for real?
How about you,
RaeAnne
RaeAnne?
start?
Oh, that's a out of the blue question. I have to think about that.
I just threw the curveball at you.
My own characters, probably not, just because I dig so deeply into their lives that I know all the hard things they've had to go through. And I'm like, I always think of that saying that, what is it, that if all our problems were on a line, you take yours and I take mine.
Right.
I just don't want what everybody else is dealing with. I'm okay with in my own lane right here.
Yes.
And so I don't know. I've written a lot of characters that I love being friends with, but I don't know that I'd want to live what they're going through. Okay. If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And for me, usually it goes back to whatever hot hero I'm writing, that I would want to be the heroine to his hero. But it changes.
Fair.
Like, for the longest time, my favorite character was Colin, the book I just wrote. And then I turned that book in. And now I've started on the next book, and it's all about Josh. So I think I'm very fickle and not loyal at all to my characters. But I kind of agree with RaeAnne, to where I love writing books. I love digging deep. And then you get to the end of the book and you've gone through it so many times, and you've gone through their heartache and the happiness, everything so many times, that you kind of need a palate cleanser so that you could move on to the next book. But I feel like by the time I finish the book that I've lived it with them. So I don't know if I would need to go back and live it again.
No, I think that's a great way to look at it. And I wouldn't call it fickle. Your tastes change over time.
Yes.
It's what suits the mood. You gotta look at it nicely.
Right?
Well, in that respect, is there a character, maybe it's a side character, even in the current book or the newest or upcoming book you've got coming, is there any character that you just sometimes wish, I would love to go back to them, or I would love to see them again? Or is it kind of, once you're done, you're done? Now I'll let Marina start this round.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of characters I'd like to go back and revisit. And some readers might not know this, that you can set up a series and in your head you think, okay, there's going to be 4 books. And then you get to book 2 or book 3 and your publisher either changes, or your current publisher says, actually, we want a new book and a new series. So it's not that, readers, please don't be mad. It's really, we want to write them, but sometimes we kind of have to go with where the market is taking us, or what our publisher is asking of us, because this is a job. Right. But there was a character in Tucker's Crossing, which was my very first book published, and it was with Kensington. And there was a kind of a tomboy character her name was Lavender, and she hated her name because she was such a tomboy, but her mom wanted her to be this little girly girl. And her and the sheriff just have this sparring relationship between them. There's all this sexual chemistry, but there's so much frustration that they're constantly bickering. And so my favorite trope to write is enemies to lovers. And so that is a character that I am dying to go back at some point and write, even if it's a novella in an anthology. So pass that along to the people who be. But yeah, I would definitely
I know
love to
we've
go
got
back and
some
write
ears
her.
listening, so
Yes.
just listen a little closer there.
Well, and I would say never say never, because I just finished a book that's coming out next summer that was based, the heroine of the book that's coming out actually this summer. I first appeared in a book I wrote like 15 years ago as a
Wow.
teenager. She was a teenager who was dealing with this really traumatic stuff in her life. And some horrible things happened to her. And I had so many readers who said, you got to write her story someday. And I didn't think I could, but now 15 years later, I brought her back into her own story. So you never know what's going to show up somewhere. So as far as as far as revisiting any of mine, I had a Christmas book out last year that I thought was going to be the start of a series, and then as I worked with my editor, we thought about, no, let's just do standalone Christmas books. So I had written this character that I thought, oh, she's going to be the next heroine, and now I'm not going back to that community, at least in the near future. And so I've still got this kind of relationship that I sort of set up as the next one, and I don't have anywhere to write theirs, but I might go back. You just never know. I always leave these little things out there and keep them keep them in the file, and when I'm looking for an idea, I could say, oh yeah, I remember that person. I could use them.
That was actually one thing I've learned from RaeAnne and Jill is I'll say something at a plotting retreat and they're like, write it down. I'm like, where? So both of them encourage me to write a file that's ideas for upcoming books. So anytime I have an idea that doesn't necessarily fit in what I'm writing right now, I write down as much as I can think about it. And then that way it's out of my mind and I'm free to move on to what I'm working on. But it took me, was I writing for 10 years before I met you, RaeAnne? 8 years? So it took 8 years.
Probably something like that.
Yeah. So it took 8 years for me to learn that little trick. So thank you, RaeAnne.
Oh, I have a million tricks.
All right, so I'm going to do one last question from readers, and then I'm going to close out our chat because it's been almost an hour, which is incredible. You guys have been great. So our last question from a reader, they're wondering, have you ever visited a place or met someone and just knew instantly that you were going to incorporate them into a book somehow, some way? And I'll let Marina start this one.
Actually, yes. And it was in the book I just finished. A friend of mine invited me to go with my family to go to Disneyland. This was when my daughter was 7 and she's now 20. And her best friend was going to Disneyland. Their family invited us. And I ended up meeting this woman's sister who had a 13-year-old son who had Asperger's. And this was the whole everything from when we went to Disneyland, and he was just the funniest, cutest, sweetest guy. And so many of these things that he said or things that were very particular to him ended up, and I kept thinking, I need to write this book. But at the time, I don't think I wasn't at the level of craft I needed to be at to write what Jill and I and RaeAnne call like a big girl book. It's not just between the hero and the heroine, but there's all these other characters and so many other things going on. I wasn't there yet. So this last year, I finally felt like I was ready to write this story. So yeah, his story has been kicking around in my head for a good long time.
As far as me, I don't know that I've ever had that experience instantly, but I was trying to think after as Marina was talking, and I can't really think of a specific time other than when I first started writing. I was working as a newspaper editor at the same time that I was trying to sell my first book, and I can remember reading stories online or interviewing some people for my job and thinking, okay, I can use this as a character. But that was like way back in the day. And these days, it's my characters come from lots of different places, but usually it's lots of different places coming together to make one character instead of, whole cloth picking someone that I see and saying that's the story I need to write. There's just, I'll take a bit from this person and a bit from this person and then bring it all together.
Yeah, I love that. I wish I could look at the world that way. I feel like I would just draw straight from my life and then everyone would pick up the book and go, why did you put me in a book? I didn't say you could. So I fully, that's why you guys do what you do and I do not. So
Well, I think a lot of writers do that in the beginning, and you do that because that's what you know. But then after you've done that, you're like, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And that's when the writing, you have to dig a lot deeper to find new things, and you have to train yourself to always be looking to think, okay, I could use that, what that person just said, I could use that in the story, and that person that I read about, I could use that in the story. And you just, it is a training process, I think.
And you're right, RaeAnne. When I think back to my first big series, the St. Helena series, I lived in St. Helena. And my hero was the oldest of a huge Italian family with 5 brothers. Well, I was married to Italian. And my babysitter growing up was the only girl in an Italian family of 5 boys. So everything in that book came from real life. And then I finished that series and I was like, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Right.
Tried to figure out other stories to tell. And of course, joined a plot group with amazing women who helped open me up to different ideas.
Absolutely. Like I said, that was our last reader question. So I'm going to finish up our live chat with, can you guys just let readers know where they can find you online, where they can learn your books, and just make sure that they're keeping up with everything you're doing? And I'll let Marina start this round for us.
The easiest way to find me is my website, and it's marinaadair.com. I'm also on Facebook at Marina Adair Author, which is also my Instagram, Marina Adair Author. And I love interacting with readers. So please find me, follow me. I'll follow you back. I love to answer questions and chat. And of course, we were readers before we were writers. So I love to talk to people about other romance books.
I'm at RaeAnneThayne.com, and then author RaeAnne Thayne on Facebook, and just RaeAnne Thayne on Instagram. So just Google me and you'll find me. Make sure you spell it right.
THAYNE.
That's right. It's the RaeAnne, all the vowels in the RaeAnne. That's the problem.
And to all of our readers that are tuning in, you can buy a copy of all 3 of the authors' books, including Jill Chavez, even though she didn't get to join us, unfortunately. We do have her book included on our bookshop shelf. That link is in the description above or below this video, depending on where you're watching it. I'm also going to drop that in the comment section. So click that link if you want to check out all 3 of the books, get to know them a little bit more, hopefully buy a copy or 2, maybe share with friends. I know everyone would love that. And also keep an eye on the comment section, because that's where I'll be announcing our grand prize winner for our flash giveaway, who will be winning a copy of each of the authors' books, including Jill Chavez's. So once again, I want to say a huge thank you both to Marina and RaeAnne, and to all of our readers who tuned in. This was a great chat. You guys had amazing questions. We didn't get to nearly even half of them because you guys just really had such a great lineup of questions and conversations to have with us. So I really appreciate that. And of course, thank you to both of our authors for being here with us.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. It's so good to see you, Marina. I want to hug you.
You too.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Thanks.